Hi, this is Ichthyosaur, and welcome back to Second Earth Alternative. I am back. I know it's been a long time, guys. I am so sorry. Basically, I've just been having a lot of personal issues lately, and it really hasn't helped that YouTube hasn't allowed this channel to be monetized, because it has kind of extended to my personal life with my parents, my wife, and just everybody really not believing in this channel and wanting me to do something different. And YouTube essentially kind of helping those belief systems by not paying me for the content that I've been giving in this channel, which is ridiculous, because this channel has always been predictive in many ways, as we've talked about so many times. And going back to that predictive topic, okay? So for those who saw my last episode, now, we talked about this possible discovery in Antarctica, which could be possibly one of the biggest paleontology discoveries ever, because it's basically a fossil, a marine fossil that's 109 feet, which would be an absolute world record. And I did contact different archaeologists about this, and you saw in my previous episode, it was their consensus that this is probably just a pile of rocks and not the biggest Ichthyosaurus fossil ever discovered. So I'm just gonna play a clip real quick just to show you guys what I'm talking about. So here's the image on Photoshop. I ended up increasing the contrast, and then here is after I put a channel mixer. Very interesting, right? Now let me compare that to the skull of Ichthyosaur. Do you see the resemblance? So what I found so fascinating about this image, right, is that if you compare that with the skull of the Ichthyosaur, notice how the Ichthyosaur has a very beaky skull, right? And it has this huge eye socket. Well, sure enough, this supposed fossil has the exact same thing. Now, what really amazed me about this is that when I put the channel mixer and you really look at the beak, look how sharp it is, and how you almost see the true ends of the beaks forking out from each other. So I kid you not, right? So right after coming out with this episode, I nearly fell off my chair when I was watching Coast to Coast AM, and I saw this article that was published. And let me pull out the article for those who may not have seen this. It says here, prehistoric sea monster may be largest that ever lived. And sure enough, what they're talking about is the exact same dinosaur fossil that we thought we discovered, called the Ichthyosaurus. The challenge became that this would be the biggest fossil ever discovered, and not just that, it would be almost like 50 feet bigger than the previous biggest marine fossil ever discovered. So the idea that I would find something that's almost twice as big as the biggest fossil, it just sounds ridiculous, you know? So I'm kind of not upset that they believe that this might just be a pile of rocks that resembled an Ichthyosaurus. However, in this article, it says here that scientists have just discovered an Ichthyosaurus bone that is 25% bigger after they scaled up the animal's full body to the previous 69-foot Ichthyosaurus. And the new Ichthyosaurus is now 85 feet. So this puts these fossils way closer to the range of the fossil that we discovered in Antarctica. But even more so, the next sentence, it says, the scientists realize that these fossils that they've been discovering, belong to giant Ichthyosaurus, and possibly to ones even bigger than the newly identified animal. So I come out with this article talking about this fossil that could be possibly the biggest Ichthyosaurus fossil ever discovered. The only challenge being that this fossil is way bigger than the biggest fossil ever discovered. So it's like, how is it that just happens? And then just 2 weeks later, National Geographic publishes an article essentially updating the possible largest size by the largest marine reptile by 25%. And then they mention it could even be bigger. So the 85 foot is not the limit. So when I say that we might have found the 109-foot Ichthyosaurus, suddenly I'm thinking, holy crap, we might actually have something here. You guys literally have the coordinates to the biggest marine fossil ever discovered. And nobody else knows about it, just you guys, and the only people I feel sorry for are the 30 subscribers I lost with my previous animated video who, don't get to have access to these links. So moving on, today I wanted to talk about Area 51. Now, Area 51 is an unbelievable base. I mean, look, I knew a little bit about Area 51 before doing this episode, but when I started actually looking in the area, when I actually started researching what's going on, it absolutely shocked me as to how big, how immense this complex is. I mean, we're talking, and I'm not even joking here, I did the calculations. We're talking about a surface area that is over 5,000 times bigger than the Vatican City. Think about that. That means you can take the Vatican City, multiply 5,000 times, put it all in one plane, and it still doesn't cover Area 51. So let's take a look. This is going to be a Area 51 virtual tour, so to speak. So I'm going to zoom out just to give you guys a sense of the map, okay? Here is California. Here is Nevada. When you zoom in the very bottom, you get to see Las Vegas. And so when I told you that Area 51 is 5,000 times bigger than the Vatican City, let me show you what I mean. Las Vegas is here. Area 51 is here. All these little yellow points that you see, which I placed as interesting markers in Area 51, these are within the general restricted perimeter area that also includes the Nellis Air Force Range and the bombing testing sites. But all these roads, the bombing testing sites, S4, Area 51, they're all connected. So what I first want to talk about was Bob Lazar's claim of these underground hangars at this area called S4. So if you study a little bit about Area 51, you know that Bob Lazar claimed that the hangars, these underground hangars, were located in an area called S4, which is actually Papoose Lake. So Area 51, I'm going to zoom in and show you exactly where it is. Area 51 is technically this base. That's what it's most widely recognized as. And if you go south, about 10 to 15 miles south of this Area 51 base, you'll get Papoose Lake. And this is where Bob Lazar claimed that there were underground hangars. Now, before I go further into this, I want to show you guys what people who are debunking the Bob Lazar claim are saying. So let's roll the tape.
Papoose Lake is southwest of Area 51, and as many of you already know, Bob Lazar and many others who have recycled this material over the years claim that there is an above top secret, even more secret base than Area 51 at Papoose Lake, with 9 hangars carved into the side of the mountain which contain extraterrestrial craft. And now I'm going to prove that he also lied about S4, a supposed super secret installation at Papoose Lake. But don't take my word for it. Here it is from George Knapp himself, the guy who made Bob Lazar famous.
I'll give you one other thing about S4 and Papoose. There was a guy named Jerry Freeman. He's an archaeologist. And you wouldn't think an archaeologist has anything to do with flying saucers. Jerry Freeman was studying the path of the 49ers. There was a gold rush of 1849 when thousands of people fled west to try to strike it rich. And a lot of them in covered wagons and settlers, and they had certain paths that they followed. And Jerry Freeman was trying to reconstruct the path that the 49ers had taken, and he thought that they had gone right straight across the Nevada test site, and in fact had been at Papoose Lake. So what he did was, very bold of him, he infiltrated the test site from going west to east and walked all the way across it, dodged security patrols. He would walk in the nighttime and then hide during the day, and he made it all the way across. Let's show the Freeman stuff. He made it all the way across the test site to Papoose Lake. These are pictures that he had set up with an automatic camera. That's Papoose behind him. That's the place where Bob Lazar said he worked. So Freeman, again, walking at night and hiding in the day, gets all the way to Papoose. He finds the evidence he's looking for. The 49ers had carved something into the rocks there. He walked all the way across the test site, not realizing that that land is still contaminated with all kinds of nuclear fallout. and he died of cancer 2 years after his journey. But anyway, he gave a little piece that sort of goes along with what Jim Goodall just said about people coming out of nowhere. Remember, Papoose Lake, where Lazar said there's this facility built in the side of the mountain, there is nothing there officially.
So there you go. Jerry Freeman would have been shot dead before he ever got close to such a super secret installation. There is no base at Papoose Lake. S4 was a lie. A stable isotope of element 115 was a lie. It doesn't exist in the geological record. Bob's degrees from Caltech and MIT were both lies. The aliens from Zeta Reticuli. You get the point. None of this is real. I know it makes for great entertainment, but seriously, kids, stay in school, go to college, take philosophy, take 4 semesters of calculus and physics, learn how to use and apply the tools of the trade, and then come back here and argue in the comments with me about why you still believe Bob Lazar.
So one of the issues that I had with this skeptic, or this S4 Area 51 debunker, is that he was actually giving guys false information. For example, he used George Knapp to try to make the point that there is nothing in Area 51, or at least in Papoose Lake. However, that's not what George Knapp actually said about the individual Jerry Freeman, who had courageously traveled by foot to S4. What George Knapp actually claimed was that he actually saw something, not just anything, but something really, really weird. So let's listen to George Knapp talking about Jerry Freeman.
Papoose Lake, there's nothing there. If you look at satellite photos, though, at least the old ones, you can see there's a road that leads down there. Let's roll the video, the next little piece of video. It's just freeze frames. There's a guy named Jerry Freeman. He's an archeologist, and he had an interest in the 49ers who had come across Nevada on their way to California. So he had a really great, that's him. If you want to just freeze that for a second, if you can. Jerry, in the 1990s, had a harebrained idea to walk across the test site, which he did. He sneaked in from the west side heading east, which is pretty smart because nobody would think anyone's crazy enough to walk across that hellhole by themselves. He walked at night and hid during the day and walked all the way across it, all the way to Papoose Lake, where he found some inscriptions in rocks that the 49ers had left, and he took photos. And he told a story while he's out there hiding in the desert at night, trying to avoid being caught. He's sitting there in the middle of nowhere, and a door opened up. A door of light in the middle of nowhere, and people came in and out, and then it closed and it was gone. What the heck is that?
And it's not just Jerry Freeman who saw actual things that were happening at Papoose Lake. There are other individuals who visited who also seem to have encountered a situation that seemed reminiscent of underground security or some kind of underground base. Let's listen in real quick.
Did you ever get any information about a facility at Papoose like the one you described?
I have a friend of mine. He's a retired senior master sergeant. He was early on in the F-117 program. And they had their badge, restricted area badge. He can go anywhere in the Nevada test site, up to and including Area 51. So they had a Humvee, and they drove around was it Groom Range? Yeah. Groom Range. And they're on Papoose Lake. There isn't anybody around, and all of a sudden, they're surrounded by guys in black uniforms, wanting to know, with their hands on their weapons, wanting to know who they were, what are you doing here? And my buddy said, we have some downtime, we're just exploring the area. He said, you turn around and you leave and don't come back.
They just kind of popped up out of nowhere?
He doesn't know where they came from. He didn't see any vehicles. All of a sudden, they were there. And he left. There was 3 or 4 guys with him. They left.
What do you make of that? That there might be something at Papoose, or was, or?
Well, according to Bob, that's where the 9 hangarettes are, camouflaged in the side of the mountain.
So as you can see, that debunking video is absolutely full of crap. It's just a complete shill video. And it's very uninformative. It's not really giving you guys the real information. So outside of that, I wanted to actually explore S4 and show you guys where the supposed base is and what's actually happening around the area. What I found most interesting about Papoose Lake, right, is that there are actually multiple roads, as you can see these tire tracks, that lead up to the lake. So we have one of these tire tracks right over here, and then these tire tracks actually cross the lake and continue all the way to the Ellis range right over here. And then if we go to this side, we will see that there's another road that extends this way, and there's even an intersection over here of dirt roads. And similarly, if we go to the other end of the lake, the northern end of the lake, we'll see another road over here. So here's the thing. When trying to analyze these secret bases, there was a strategy that I actually took. It was kind of like a logical concept. Bob Lazar said that they took a bus to get to this underground base, okay? So if I'm going to trust Bob Lazar's account, then I know that there has to be some kind of transportation device that takes these people to the base. So while the base might be underground and hidden, there's no way they can hide the tire tracks. So the logic that I was thinking was, if I find tire tracks in this general area that out of nowhere just disappear in the middle of nowhere, then either one of two things could be happening. It could either be a security outlook point, where the security outlook points are just tracks that go into the hills and then they kind of stop, and that's where the security chills out to get a vantage point. Or it could be an underground base, because like I said, they have to take the scientists there somehow. So while the underground bases might be hidden, the tire tracks are not. So that's the kind of logic that I use to find a lot of these secret underground bases that I'm about to show you guys. So because there are so many roads and tire tracks that led into the actual Papoose Lake itself, it was very hard for me to, in this particular case, triangulate the exact position that this underground base could be. And when I zoomed into S4 and just kind of did a little circle around the area, in all honesty, I did not find anything that was compelling that absolutely told me that there was something artificial exactly where a lot of these individuals think that S4 is located. However, that doesn't mean that there wasn't interesting aspects to this area. So let me zoom out and show you what I mean. So if we go just a little bit south, and if you remember Bob Lazar, he talked about how he had traveled from Area 51, which is up here, and he traveled south 10 to 15 miles to Papoose Lake, and that the base was somewhere in the mountain range of the Papoose mountain range, in the southern aspect of the Papoose mountain range, which would be somewhere around here. However, if we were to extend this mountain range all the way down to here and claim that this might be a southern aspect of the Papoose mountain range, well, we do have some interesting sites over here that are kind of unexplainable. So whereas that one YouTuber claimed that there's absolutely nothing in S4, or at least in Papoose Lake, let me show you what happens when we start following these tire tracks. So I start following this tire track up here, and I think most of these tire tracks are for security detail. Every once in a while you'll see one that has like a little loop, which you know is probably for a bus, so that bus can turn around. But as I follow this track, check this out. Here is the little loop that I talked about where a bus can go and turn around. And then look at this. Right next to it is this strange square, right? And I don't know, there's no other construction here, there's no other buildings, but what I can tell you is that this square is definitely artificial. So it kind of implies to me that maybe there's something underground here that I can't see right away. So let's actually go back in time on Google Earth to see how it looks in different times, so you guys get a better sense of whether this is artificial or whether this is natural. See, you can see it really starts sticking out as I go back in time a little bit. So, okay, so whether it's an underground base or not, one thing we can definitely determine is there is something near Papoose Lake. Now, whether you want to call it underground base or not, I don't know. I don't know what that is. I just know there's some kind of artificial square and there's a little loopy-doop right over here on the roads that would be beneficial for large vehicles such as buses that wanted to go by this area. And to a certain extent, what I find so fascinating is that this still meets some of the description that Bob Lazar described, which is the southern aspect of the Papoose mountain range. So if I zoom out, here is Area 51. This is the Papoose mountain range. Here is the southern aspect of the Papoose mountain range that many people think S4 is located. And just south of that is where I'm showing you is definitely an artificial structure embedded within the terrain. I don't know what it is.